In this week's parasha, we open a new book, a book called Devarim, words, effectively. Moshe Rabbeinu speaks words. Ele ha-devarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. These are the words that Moshe spoke to all of the Jewish people, be'ever ha-Yarden, on the other side of the river Jordan, bamidbar, in the desert, ba'arava, mul suf, opposite the Suf, the Yam Suf, Ben Paran, uben Tofel, velavan, vechatzirot, v'dizahav. Now, that's a lot of places that we just described. In fact, that's way too many places for this actually to be correct, right? It can't be in Arava and Suf and Paran and Tofel, all these places. So what does it mean that these are the words that Moshe spoke in these places? So I want to share with you. Rashi says something unbelievable. It was 11 days, the Pasuk carries on and says, 11 days from Mechorev Derech HaSeir al Kadesh Barnea, in the 40th year, 11th month, right before they're about to go into the land of Israel, Moshe speaks to them. Be'ever HaYarden be'eretz Moab ho'il Moshe. At this place, Moshe began to give his final speech to the Jewish people. It's a speech that lasts, our rabbis tell us, Ele is Gematria 36. It's a 36-day speech, the last 36 days of Moshe's life, as he speaks and tells the Jewish people all the things that he wants to tell them before he dies. Very powerful. Moshe is telling them all the things. He's held on to them for this long. And what does he say to them in all these interesting places? Achareha koto, he gives them this speech after he's gone to war against Sichon, against Og, okay? And he's ready to open up his mouth. And then, it doesn't actually tell us what Ho'il Moshe Be'er, Moshe began to explain the Torah. Now, it's very interesting. You know, you could tell, as I always say, a lot about any culture by the amount of words that they have for any given thing. If a culture is obsessed with exercise, like today we are in the United States, so you don't just call things exercise. There's running and there's swimming. Now, used to be that there was just biking. Now there's biking and spinning and, Soul Cycle, and each one with its own little shtick, each one a little bit different from the other. When something gets very important to you, so you develop different words to describe nuanced versions of that thing, okay? Now, in Judaism, what do Jews love to do? We love to talk. So in Judaism, there's at least 3 words that describe the idea of speech. There are actually more than that, but 3 that get used consistently. One is Amira, okay? Vayomer Moshe. The second is Vayidaber, and Moshe spoke, right? And the third one is Vayaged, or Lehagid, okay? Each one of these means to speak. But Amira represents soft speech. Dibur represents harsh speech. Ele ha-devarim, this is Moshe in his last speech, as he closes out this epic time that he's led them through the desert. He's about to die. What does Moshe have to say to them? He's got harsh words for them. And what are his harsh words? We actually don't hear them. Rashi says, let me give you a clue. And I'm going to read one of the Rashis, who points it out to the greatest extent, but you could see them in all the Rashis on this pasuk. Rashi says, Ben Paran uben Tofel velavan. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, quotes the Amora, Rabbi Yochanan, the Tana, excuse me. Chazarnu al kol mikra. We've been through all of the Torah. Velo matzinu, we've not found makom, even one place, sheshmo Tofel velavan. These places that they're supposed to be in, Tofel, Lavan, they don't exist. Ella, rather, it's not that Moshe spoke to them in a place. Rather, Hochichan, he gave them rebuke. Al hadivarim are the things that they did. Shetafilu etaman. Tofel is not a name of a place, it's the name of a word, of something that they had done. They minimized, they made unimportant. The man, what was the man? What do we know about the man? The man we know it was Lavan, it was white. So what does it mean, Ben Tofel u Ben Lavan? They weren't in the place of Tofel Lavan. Moshe was hinting to them in his speech, in his harsh speech, before he dies, when he wants to tell them all the things that he could not say all these years. What does Moshe say? Tofel, Lavan, you shouldn't have spoke the way you spoke about the man. God gave you such a beautiful gift, and you know what? You're complaining about the fact that it's not meat, that it's not something else. That was not right. Moshe also says to them, Chatzerot, what did you do in Chatzerot? There was a machloket of Korach. You guys got involved in this big fight. What else does he say to them? By using these little hints, Suf, when you were on the Yam Suf and God was about to split the sea for you. What did you say? God, why'd you bring us here to die? I can't believe it. Aren't there enough graves in Egypt? Moshe is speaking harshly to them. But there's not a single harsh word in everything that he says. Everything is hinted at. It's hidden. You know, he uses hints to say everything. And the final one, V'di Zahav. Where's Di Zahav? Rashi says, Hochichan al ha'egel. He gave them rebuke for the egel, the golden calf, she'asu, that they made, bishvil rov zahav shaya lehem, because they had so much gold there with them. Now, I need you to understand. I want you to imagine for 1 second, in the final moments of your life, when your family is gathered around you, and you have a chance now to say your final will and testament to your sons, to your daughters. Could you imagine what you might say? You call one of them over and you say, you know, I want you to make sure that your mother's going to be okay. Take care of her. Support her. And not only that, do me a favor. He calls him even closer. He says, she's young, and I know that she's going to protest. But please, make sure she knows that it is my will, it is my desire that she meets somebody else. She shouldn't be alone for many more years to come. She should live and be well for a long time. Tell her, make sure she knows that it's okay for her to meet someone. And if she doesn't, bring that guy around for Shabbat lunch so that she should meet him at the table. Could you imagine the seriousness of this conversation? Then he calls over another one of his sons and says, you know, it's not normally my place to tell you what to do, but you gotta be a little bit harder on your son. He's taking things for granted. He's not working hard. He's not doing things in the right way. Do you want a kid that's gonna expect you to support him for the rest of your life? He's got that much more in him. Talk to him. Bring him to the office. Drag him out of bed. You can imagine the tone of someone who's waited all this time to say things that will be heard. Why does Moshe wait until now to say it? Because he knows that when someone's about to die, everyone takes what they say very seriously. Right? The last words your father said to you, your rabbi said to you, wow. Not only that, though, even more than that, he also knows that there's no ego here. It's not that the person lost their temper. Each word of these is measured. You know it comes from deep in their heart. So you're going to let it penetrate. You're going to actually follow in what he says. So Moshe waits all this time. And what does he say? He says almost nothing. He hints. Remember Vegas? 1962? Remember? He says the name of a couple of places. He doesn't even mention what they did. The greatest sin the Jewish people ever did, the Egel, and what does Moshe say? Di Zahav, too much gold. That's what he calls it. Dai Zahav. There was too much gold. What's going on here? I need you to understand the lesson and the magnitude of what we're supposed to learn just from this idea. You know, the title of the class tonight is Angels Don't Get Hungry. And it comes from a story that I read a little while ago that made a tremendous impact on me. Reb Leib Chasman was a student of the Chafetz Chaim. And one day, he goes to the rabbi's house for Shabbat, and they get back from synagogue. They walk in, they sit down at the table, and the rabbi starts making Kiddush. Yom HaShishi. The student's not going to correct this rabbi. Rabbi, we skipped the Shalom Aleichem. We just went straight to Kiddush. But he's very curious. Anyway, the rabbi makes Kiddush, gives out the wine, they wash their hands, they have challah, still nothing. They eat, sit down, they have the fish, and as soon as the fish is done, the rabbi stands up, Shalom Aleichem. The student is thinking, either I'm crazy or he's crazy, but this is not how Shabbat goes. This is not how I learned in my house how to do Shabbat. What's going on? Listen to this, Rabotai. So he asks his Rebbe, the Chafetz Chaim. He says, what's going on, Rabbi? Why in the world are we saying Shalom Aleichem only now? And the rabbi says to him, because angels don't get hungry. You're sitting here. You haven't eaten all day. You're a student in yeshiva. Back in those times, they didn't have a big cafeteria for the yeshiva for everyone to have hot lunches. They had an idea called Essenteg. Essenteg means eating days. Eating days meant that you were a yeshiva boy, you had no food to eat, someone in the community would take pity on you and tell you on Tuesdays you'll eat with me. And people would actually be moser nefesh to give food to these yeshiva boys. Okay? Essenteg also had a little bit more of a sinister meaning. It was the day that you ate, because there were days where no one was able to take you in, and on that day you didn't eat. So if there was Essenteg, there was nicht Essenteg. There were days that you didn't have what to eat. And you had to wait for the next day hungry, but knowing that you were giving up everything to be a Torah student. Today, we have it easy. So the Chafetz Chaim says to him, angels don't get hungry. You, Hazi, you didn't eat, you have a little wine, have some challah, have some food in your stomach. The angels will wait till after the first course. I can't tell you how much I learned from this story. The idea that the right thing to do, Shalom Aleichem, what are you talking about? I had guests all these years, and I'm sitting there, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet. They never had Shabbat before in their life. Mi melech, Malachei HaMelechim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem. They're all thinking we heard this part already. Shalom Aleichem 3 times. We're finally finished. Mi melech, Malachei HaMelechim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hazaku Baruch, let's eat. Boachem l'Shalom 3 times. Baruch Huni l'Shalom. B'shivtechem l'Shalom. If you're Ashkenaz, B'setchem l'Shalom. If you're Sephardic and you went to Ashkenaz Yeshiva, you do B'shivtechem and B'setchem because you're all confused, right? But either way, you're sitting there praying and saying all these things. And what are you saying them for? You're saying them for the angels. But the angels don't get hungry. The Chafetz Chaim wasn't a liberal rabbi. He wasn't the guy who was trying to have open orthodoxy. He was the one who wrote the Mishnah Berurah. He's someone who was a stickler for halakha, exactly as halakha was supposed to be done. But he understood that while it's true that there's a beautiful idea of Shalom Aleichem, and it's magnificent, and we're welcoming the angels, and the angels are giving a blessing to our Shabbatim, lovely. Is a guy sitting at your table hungry? Don't waste his time. First give him something to eat, and then sing to the angels. Angels don't get hungry. Sometimes the things that you're supposed to do in a given time, the thing that you think should be done now, actually has to be pushed off till later, because there's a greater value in something else. And that's not against halakha. That's understanding what halakha actually wants from me. Halakha is a dynamic process. It's a fascinating idea because most people think of halakha as immutable, something that doesn't move. And what they don't realize is that the root word of halakha, it's shared with the word halicha, which means to go. Halachot olam lo hal tikre halichot ela halachot. We say it every day, that there's a synonymous nature between the fact that halakha travels with you. It moves with you through your life, through the various things, and sometimes it adapts itself. And that's not doing halakha, that's just the halakha here. There's a king in the Jewish people. He carries one Sefer Torah with him everywhere he goes, and he has another Sefer Torah for his house. Always bothered me. Get one Sefer Torah, small enough to be portable. You don't need to write 2. The answer is no. There's a Torah for when you're at home and everything's in its right place and everything's exactly as it should be. But there's also another Torah that the king, a leader, needs to take with him when he's on a journey. When the people are tired, when the people are exhausted. How do you relate to that situation? There are halachot of this. And Moshe Rabbeinu was aware that while there's a tremendous mitzvah in the Torah, you have to rebuke, you have to tell someone, you have to give them tochacha if they've done something wrong. You need to stand up for what's right. But the whole point of giving tochacha is so that the person will listen. I want to share with you an amazing story. Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Mir. And one day he was working with a kid and he told him about something that he did. He And anyway, the kid leaves, listens to the rabbi, leaves. Hajj, he's done. After he's done, he walks away. The rabbi, looks at him. He's checking him out. He's following, seeing his progress. 2 weeks go by. The rabbi calls him back over. Kid comes back over. He actually hasn't changed anything. He's exactly the same kid. He's actually feeling quite embarrassed that the rabbi's now calling him over, and he hasn't changed at all. The rabbi says, I'd like to apologize profusely. Please forgive me for giving you tochacha, for telling you off, for speaking, harshly to you, for making you feel added distress. And the kid says, Rabbi, why are you apologizing? I haven't, actually, I'm being honest with you, I still haven't changed that thing that you told me about. And the rabbi looks him in the eye and he says, that's why I'm apologizing. He says, if any way you didn't change, then what was the point in me causing you that pain? Please forgive me. You're now a person who's doing the wrong thing, but you're also a person who's carrying my rebuke on your shoulders. I heard this story about Rav Nosson Tzvi Fingal and it shook me. Because really, isn't that always what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to give someone rebuke, but ultimately it's up to them whether or not they're going to do it, whether or not they're going to listen. You can't decide that they're going to, so why did the rabbi apologize? Did he do anything wrong? That was exactly what he was supposed to do. What was he apologizing for? And I think there's an amazing idea here. Where Rav Nosson Tzvi was explaining to this young man, what he was saying was something of great wisdom. If I had given you tochacha correctly, you would have listened. If you didn't listen, it must be that I did it wrong, and if I did it wrong, I hurt you for no reason. Rabotai, we learned 3 great lessons from Moshe Rabbeinu. We learned, number 1, that when someone needs to be told, when someone needs to be guided, when someone needs to be rebuked, when someone needs to be chastised, there's 3 questions they have to ask. Question number 1, where do I rebuke him? Do I rebuke him in front of his friends? Do I rebuke them in front of the family? Where do I rebuke them? Where do I say, oh yeah, this guy, your wife says a story, she always exaggerates. Now in front of company you're going to say that? Yeah? Now, with your kids, the kid comes late to the Shabbat table. You have company over. The kid gets up. You say, oh, look, he slept in through Shacharit again. You want to have that conversation? Fadal. It's not their business. You owe him an apology. A public humiliation. That's what just happened. What we're learning over here is that there's a where, there's a when, and there's a how. Moshe Rabbeinu recognizes that the answer to where was when it was right by the edge of Eretz Israel. They're so close to the goal. They're going to go in there. They're going to become a new people. They're going to have their country. Now, when it's going to stay in their minds, the whole point of this encouragement, of this tochacha, is in order, not that you get it off your chest and you feel better because now you yelled and you let out your frustration. This is not about you. This is about them. Rabbi Pinchasi points out that the Hebrew word for encouragement is idud. Ayin, yud, dalid, vav, dalid. The root of that word idud is shared with the Hebrew word for od, which means more. When you're encouraging someone, the purpose of said encouragement is to be able to actualize the person's potential, to make them capable of doing more, showing the person how strong they are, how smart they are, how capable they are. When you do that, you encourage that person, suddenly much more comes out of that person, more than you thought, but even sometimes more than they thought that they were capable of doing. So, what we see over here is that Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking harsh words to the Jews, but he does it in such a beautiful way. The how, when he asks himself, how am I going to do this? He realizes that, you know what, if I say you did the Egel, and you did Korach, and you did this, and you did that, all these terrible things you did, what is he going to wind up doing? He's going to wind up convincing the Jews that they are terrible people, and they're just going to give up. So instead, when he mentions it, he disguises the name of each one of these things. Oh, Paran, what's Paran? The name of the place. Oh, Suf, the name of the place. Doesn't say what they did. But it's interesting to note, On some of the hints, he hints by using the name of the place. And on some of the hints, he uses expressions. Dizahav means that there was too much gold. How come he didn't say Sinai, Suf, Paran? Just list all the names of the places. And the answer, Rabotai, I think, is a fascinating expression in how you give rebuke. This Dizahav, where does it come from? Enough gold. Actually, it's a conversation that Moshe had with God. When God comes to Moshe and says, your people have sinned, they deserve to be destroyed for worshiping the Egel at Har Sinai, it was such a heinous crime. It was like cheating on, the Gemara says, like a kala, a bride cheating on her husband under the chuppah. They were marrying God at Har Sinai and they worshipped another God. How could they have done that? It was such a terrible, a powerful sin. Okay? Moshe comes to God. God, he says, you want to destroy them? You did this. Dizahav, you gave them so much gold. What did you think was going to happen? When parents give their kids excessively, they give them everything they want without ever guiding them. They're always supporting their choices. Yeah, sure, whatever you want. Great. You want to do that? No problem. You like this person? Go out with them. Yeah, I don't care. I really have no say. I only exist to support my child. If you're never willing to guide them, if you're never willing to rebuke them, you will ensure that you create a monster. This idea, Ele HaDevarim, is Moshe speaks harshly. But interestingly enough, it is not the words that he uses which are harsh, but it is a harsh truth spoken kindly. Dizahav, Moshe says, God, this is not on them, this is on you. You give a 17-year-old a brand new Lamborghini, odds are he's going to get killed driving 100 miles an hour, or he'll kill someone else. It's too fast a car. It's too big a Yetzer Hara. You put someone in a bad situation. What do you think is going to happen? You give a kid everything that he wants. Of course he learns, I get what I want when I want it. So what does he learn about commitment? What does he learn about the hard work that it takes to have a marriage? What does he learn about a job if you just took him in and made him CEO? It doesn't work. Ele HaDevarim, it is important to have harsh words, but it is important to be able to give them over in the most beautiful way. I remember reading a story that brought me to tears. There was a young woman who unfortunately lost both her parents, and she was an orphan from father and mother. And at the age of 21 or 22, she had a hard time finding someone. She had no one fighting her corner, no one looking for her, until finally someone suggested she go out with this young man, and she started dating him, and the man was a wonderful young man, lots of great qualities. And as time goes on, she realizes that although he's a great person with great qualities, there's something about him which is a big and a critical flaw in his character. Now, I'm saying this to all the singles out there, and I say this to all the parents of singles out there. You can never marry someone expecting them to change. You could hope that they'll change. You could wish that they'll change. You could think that if they change or this element of them changes, it's a bonus. But expecting them to change is a dangerous game. Especially if that thing is not just a happens to be, but it's a critical part of their makeup. There aren't many things that are like that, but there definitely are some. A person who has a severe temper, even if, by the way, lots of people who have severe tempers can be very kind and generous until they're not. Lots of abusers are very loving until they punch you in the face. So she realizes that this man, he's got so many good sides, great things about him, but at the same time, he also has a critical flaw. And she doesn't know. She normally would go to her parents for guidance, but she doesn't have parents. So she goes to the rabbi of her shul. And she asks the rabbi, what should I do? I've been having such a hard time meeting anyone. I finally met this guy. He's got so much good about him, but there's this one thing which is really bothering me, and I don't know, does it outweigh all these other things? The rabbi, he knows what she's gone through. He's thinking to himself on the one hand, on the other hand, back, forth, he's trying to figure out. He says, I don't know. The girl starts crying. She says, look, you can't tell me I don't know. They always said to me that the Bet Din, the city, court, has an obligation to raise, the Yetomim, the orphans of the city. I'm coming now for guidance. I need your guidance. Don't tell me you don't know. I need help. Help me. The rabbi says, listen, this is too big for me. I'm going to take it to the biggest rabbi of our generation, Rebbe Lazar Menachem Shach, the Gadol Hador, the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovich. He calls the rabbi, he tells the rabbi the situation. He says, what should I tell the girl? Yes, no, carry on, don't. He says to him, you cannot say no. Rabbi says, why? But I think the guy's got all this difficult stuff that he's got, and who knows what that's going to be like. I don't want the responsibility of this girl having a miserable life because I didn't give her the right advice. Rav Shach says, listen, you could tell her you don't know again. You could encourage her whatever you want. You can't tell her no. You tell her no for the rest of her life. What if she doesn't meet someone? What if she meets someone, but wonders in the back of her head, that guy would have been better. The rabbi told me no. It's his fault. She'll hold it against you for the rest of her life. You cannot say no. But he says, have her get in touch with me. Let her call me. Girl calls the rabbi. Rabbi says, why don't you come over? I'd love to meet you. She comes to the Gadol Hador's house. Rav Shach sits her down. He says, before we start, he says, I heard that you're actually someone who's lost both parents. So sad, really touched me. My children are already grown. I'm an older person. I have some more time, some more love in my heart. I have a suggestion. Tell me what you think. Would you be willing, to allow me the honor of adopting you as my own daughter? And that means that you don't come to me just with problems, but you come to me with all of your joys and all your happiness, and whenever you need me, you always have my door. You don't have to knock. You're my family. I'd love to be your dad. And the girl is overcome with emotion. To imagine she's got this rabbi is now her family, the biggest rabbi. No, everyone waits ages to speak to him, and he's going to have all the time in the world for her. She doesn't even hesitate. She says, absolutely, I would love that. And the rabbi says, okay, it's a done deal. So let's talk. What's going on? Rabbi knows what's going on. She tells him the thing, lays him out. Rav Shach sits there, thinks, probably strokes his beard, and he says, no, I don't think you should carry on. You can't expect something like this, a critical flaw. You can't expect it to change. And you can't risk it not changing, because that life would be hell for you. And the girl says, thank you so much. Weight off of my chest. I didn't know what to do. I was going back and forth in my head. Finally, thank you so much. What happens? She leaves. 20 minutes later, there's a phone call ringing. Who's ringing on the phone? Rav Shach's house. The rabbi. The rabbi's like, Rabbi, what are you doing to me? I wanted to say no. You told me I can't say no. Then you bring it to your house and then you say no. It's not fair. Why can you say no if I can't say no? And Rav Shach said to him, because you're her rabbi. And I am now her dad. I'm now her father. And a father can say no. When you know that that person has your back 100%, when you know that that person loves you and is going to be there for you all the time, then you can give them advice which is very hard to hear. Moshe Rabbeinu knows that he wants to tell the Jewish people what to stay away from. But he also knows that in the beginning, all this time, he's been waiting to give them this rebuke, and he doesn't give it to them. Why? He waits right till before he dies. Why? Says the pasuk, Acharei hakoto et Sichon ve'et Og. Moshe said, until I go to war for them, until I lay my life on the line, until I go fight the beast that Og is, and put myself in front of everybody else, until they see that I would die for them. How did they know? Whether my criticism comes from the fact that I'm a critical person, that I'm an angry person, that I like yelling at people, or whether it comes from compassion and concern and worrying about them. There are many times when we as fathers or husbands or wives or friends or daughters that we need to say to someone, no. We need to say to someone, this is bad. I know that you like it. I know that you think you're worried about giving it up, but you need to take it in another direction. You can't open your mouth until you prove You prove to them, I'm your dad, I'm your husband, I'm your wife, I'm your parent. And that needs constant reiteration. Saying the words, by the way, are not enough. It needs to be illustrated and backed up by action. Moshe says, I want to tell them this. I've been waiting. I wait till I die. And right before I die, when they cannot wonder about my motives, when it's not about ego and it's not about power, when it's right before they get into the land of Israel, so the lessons I give them will stay in their minds when they go in there, so that when they begin to keep the land, the laws of the land, they'll have it ringing in their ears still. You know, you're going to great adventures, you want your kids to behave in the park. You can't give them the speech before you leave the house, because by the time they get to great adventures and they're all geared up and so excited to go on the rides, they already forgot what you said. You got to give them that speech in the parking lot as you get out of your car. Okay, guys, Kiddush Hashem, no cutting the lines, right? That's when you give the thought. So number one, you're going to criticize, you're going to give harsh words. Number one, make sure that they are done in a way where the person retains their dignity. Where you and them, they know what you're talking about, but no one else needs to know. You use a hint, you allude. You make sure that the person is capable of being a person. Because if they're a person, then they can take that criticism and they can work with it. But if they can't be a person because you cut them in half, then what's going to happen? Then your criticism was nothing more than some ego-driven, testosterone-filled rant. It's not od, it's not idud. Rabotai, I want to read you the words of Rashi. Lefikach satam et hadevarim. Therefore, he hid or he cloaked these words. V'hiskiram beremez, and he said them in a hint. Mipnei kivodan shel Yisrael, because of the honor of the glory of Am Yisrael. But Dizahav is the most powerful of the examples, because sometimes the thing that the child needs most of all is for you to take some of the blame too. This is not only on them. I want to share with you, a while ago, I had a student that came to my house in England. She was dating someone who wasn't Jewish. And the parents stepped in, and when they found out about it, they told her parents weren't religious at all. They kept nothing Jewish whatsoever. Children of Holocaust survivors. They told her, you can't do this. If you marry this guy, we're cutting you off, we're throwing you out, we're going to sit Shiva on you. They give her the whole spiel. She comes to my house and she's crying her eyes out. I'm a rabbi from, that taught her in school. She comes, look, here I am. We never did anything Jewish. I met this guy in college. I brought him home, and now the parents are telling me, that they're going to cut me off. They're going to sit Shiva for me because and she's crying. She was hurt. She was broken. And I said to this young woman, I said, I have to say, I actually agree with you. She said, you agree with me? I said, I don't agree with you. I'm not going to marry you. I'm not going to be the rabbi to arrange this. I don't think you should marry him, but I agree with you. It's not fair that your parents are telling you this now. You can't raise a child and teach him that Judaism is unimportant and archaic and stupid and backwards, and then when the child brings up, you decide that this is the piece of Judaism that's important to you. You can't tell your kid that kosher is not important. We like to eat wherever we like to eat, and that's fine, and then yell at him for not being home Friday night, because it's the same God that did both. And the kid, he's very careful. He has attenuated ears. Oh, that's stupid? That's outdated? So then all of it is outdated, isn't it? And the girl she's broken. I called the parents and I said, listen, I have your daughter here. She's very upset. Could you spare 15 minutes? Could you come down? They come down, and I said to them, please, you gave these harsh words. You know what they said? They said to their daughter that her grandmother was turning over in her grave, Holocaust survivor, that the family was going to be destroyed. I said, that's how you're doing this? Now is when you're choosing to bring up the Jewish guilt card? It's not fair. She wound up breaking up with him. She wound up leaving the house, hugging her parents. How? She now has a beautiful husband, a beautiful Jewish family. You know how? I said to the parents, please, instead of blaming her and cursing her out and telling her you're going to sit shiva for her, maybe admit that you may have made a mistake. That actually Judaism was more important to you than you realized all those years. Because if it wasn't, why would this bother you? What difference does it make? If you're not Jewish at all, what difference did it make? The answer is, it means something to you, but you never taught her that. The parents said, maybe we're at fault here. Maybe we did something wrong. Maybe grandma should be rolling in her grave, not from you, but from us. But we are where we are. It is important. It means the world. She saw that they were talking actually with such emotion and conviction. For the first time in her life, she heard them talking about it with passion, with strength, and not blaming. You look at all these different names of these places, and all of them are the fault of the Jews. And then Moshe says, and you know what? The worst sin, the one that makes you think that you're unredeemable, it wasn't all your fault. These Zahav, God gave you so much gold. You didn't know what to do with it. You were so spoiled. Sometimes parents taking a little bit of the responsibility away from that person. Sometimes when a friend turns to someone and says, look, you made a terrible mistake. But it wasn't your fault that you made the mistake. Anyone could have made the mistake. Anyone might have gotten suckered in by this guy's, charms and, and wealth and everything. Anyone. You're not a terrible person. The Shlach HaKadosh gives an unbelievable insight into the pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk says in Mishlei, in the 9th chapter, Al tochach letz, do not give rebuke to a letz. A letz is someone who takes nothing seriously. Everything is, he makes a mockery out of it, he scorns it. Al tochach letz, pen yisnaeka, maybe he'll hate you. Hocheach lechacham, give rebuke to a wise man, v'yahaveka, and he will love you. This pasuk bothered me always to no end. Because it seems like the most pointless pasuk. Like, if you give rebuke to a guy who's he's taking life not seriously, he makes fun of everything, he's going to hate you. You know what you should give rebuke to? Give rebuke to a wise man. Yeah, but the wise man doesn't need your rebuke. How does this help me? I need to help this guy. I need him to get the tochach. I need him to get it. I need him to get the divarim. Says the Shlach HaKadosh. It's not talking about two different people. Al tochach letz, when you sit opposite the person, don't rebuke him as if he's a letz, as if he's a lowlife, as if he's a miserable good-for-nothing. You're a horrible addict. You're a terrible person who's angry. You're a violent, narcissistic pig. You tell the guy that, Al tochach letz, pen yisnaek, I'll hate you. You know why? Because you left him no choice. If he's got to choose who to hate, you or himself, who do you think he's going to choose? Al tochach letz pen yisnaeka. Hocheach lechacham. Give tochacha lechacham to a wise person. V'yahaveka, and then he will love you. Look at the letz as if he's a chacham. Find something clever about him. There was a rabbi who was a Rosh Yeshiva in a yeshiva, and he found out from this boy. A boy told him, look, there's one of these kids, very clever boy. He's a bit of a troublemaker, very smart, but you know what? He had a troublesome streak. The rabbi, he goes up to the rabbi, he finds out this boy, he's going out now, he's leaving rabbi, he's going to the movies. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but for a yeshiva boy in a strict and a good yeshiva, that's like, wow, I can't believe it. He's ditching yeshiva to go to the movies. Anyway, what's it called? The rabbi says, okay. He says, tell the boy to come here. Anyway, this guy is like, okay. He goes and calls the boy. He thinks for sure he's getting thrown out of the yeshiva. comes to the rabbi says, I heard you going to the movies. The boy says, yeah, go to the movies. He says, it's cold outside. Make sure you take a sweater. Go back to the dormitory and get a sweater. The boy is sitting, his mouth is hanging open. He says, he goes, look, you might be worried you're going to miss the film. Don't worry, there's another showing after. You get the second film. Just make sure you get... The boy's like blown away. He goes, he gets a sweater, he goes to the film. Comes back that night. Now he's not so cocky anymore. Now he's thinking to himself, oh my God. He knew where I was going. He gave me the out. He told me to go get the sweater. I didn't listen. I went, forget it, I'm done here. The kid's shaking the whole night, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The morning he's going to be chucked out. The rabbi, the young man comes to the rabbi. He says, Rabbi, I can't believe it. You're telling the kid he should stay here. You know, he's one of the older boys in the yeshiva. He says, you're telling him to stay. Everyone's going to learn from him. You should throw him out. Really, teach him a lesson. Teach everybody a lesson. The rabbi slaps him across the face. The next morning, guy comes in to the yeshiva. The rabbi's waiting for you. He opens the door to the office. He sits down, shaking, ready for And the rabbi says, "Nu, tell me something that you thought of in the learning in the yeshiva, in this shiur this morning." The boy's a very smart boy. He starts telling him a chidush that he learned. Rosh Hashanah, it's amazing. Wow, fantastic. Come tomorrow also. I want to hear something great out of you. Again, the next day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day. A long time passes. And this young man becomes one of the best boys in the yeshiva. And the rabbi and this bachur that snitched on him are standing together. And the rabbi says, I gave him a pat on the cheek. I asked him what he was learning. You, I slapped. When someone slips, they need a pat on the cheek. They need to be asked, tell me something smart. Hochach lechacham, v'yahaveka, and who will love you. Someone who suggests throwing someone else out, that deserves a patch. He says, as the boy is walking down the aisle to start a beautiful family, he says, who was right? Me or you? This is such an important thing for our time. Our children, our society is so fragile. It's part of why you can't say anything anymore. There's nothing that you could say which doesn't offend people. Everything is offensive. Comedians today have it very hard. You can't say anything about anybody. We've lost the ability to laugh at ourselves, at the things that we do, at the silly things that we do. We take ourselves so heavy, so serious. If someone, God forbid, suggests we did something wrong, it's World War III. But the answer is, actually, that if you're capable of giving that encouragement and that guidance in such a beautiful way, to say, look, you made a mistake, but Dizahav, anyone would have done it with so much gold. It is important, number one, to support the ones that we love, but it is also important to guide them. It's important to say soft words, words of support and encouragement, and also to share harsh words. But the harsh words don't have to be poisonous. You know, there was once a time when as a community, we were capable of getting to certain places via what's called spiritual herd immunity. Listen to this. Unbelievable. Herd immunity. Today, we're familiar with the term from Corona, right? We're familiar with the term from other diseases. But there's an idea of herd immunity. As an example, you know, when you think of people and the decisions that they make in their life, a lot of times those decisions are made by consensus. It's mob psychology. Everyone that I know, this is what they do. So in the religious community, by the time, you know, if you're 21 years old, 22, whatever the age is, now it's time to date. In the secular community, it's not so much like that. You know, you date when you're ready to get married. But the idea that a person can be guided by that which is around him, some people will call it sheep. But you know what? Sometimes it's not bad to be a sheep. So as an example, the fact that now there's a huge craze of eating healthy in our community, That means that lots of people by default are now eating healthy. Instead of just pizza and burgers, we're having, all these different foods. So sometimes having the herd protect you, having the herd guide you, things that happen, that's great, because when it works out for the right reason. But lots and lots and lots of things now, as we are exposed to such a wide range of things, we need to be able to make these decisions for ourselves. And that requires, I believe, much more strength than ever before. When the whole community did something, no one dared to not do it. A lot of people talk about this with regards to divorce. People say, marriages today are much worse than marriages used to be. And that is true, no question. But some of the reason why there's more divorce now is because it used to be that there was a stigma to getting divorced. And now that stigma has gone away. So really, all of those people actually should have gotten divorced back then, but they just didn't because they couldn't bear the embarrassment because it was considered something that you, like as a human failure, as opposed to the fact that maybe these two people actually weren't compatible. They're not the best, fit for each other. The reason why I bring this up is because in a generation which is so sensitive, in a generation which needs to have independent thought, because you know what? The herd mentality is not working anymore. The fact that you're part of a community, the fact that Jews marry Jews, that doesn't work anymore. Now, the majority of Jews in the world are not marrying Jews. 90% of the Jewish people today is not religious. The intermarriage rate in places ranges between 50 and 90%, depending on the city. So if you're going to think, you want to imbue that in your kids, in your family, in your friends, what do you need to do if they need to make independent choices? You need to build them up. You need to pat them on the cheek. You need to make the person have the tochacha of a chacham, of a wise person. Make the person feel like they are wise, like they are capable. And when you do that, then actually the harsh words that you're trying to say, they come through. But I want to share with you one more example that I read in this amazing book from Rabbi Spiro. He writes about a 70-year-old professor who knocks on the door of a rabbi, and he says to this rabbi, I would like to sit and learn together with you. Really? What do you want to learn? He says, I'm a secular professor, I'm 70 years old, me and my wife, we want to sit and learn, we want to know what it means to be Jewish. I really have no idea. He says, well, now at 70 years old, you're waking up, you're coming in? He says, yeah, let me tell you. When I was a young boy, my parents brought me in from Russia. We came, and at the time, we didn't know anything. So she asked her family, where should I send my son? They sent me to a yeshiva. We were not religious. In Russia, they suffered. They didn't want anything to do with religion. Okay? So what happened? They came in. I went to the school. That night, I come home, I start talking about Shema. I'm talking about the Mishnayot. I'm talking about all these things that we learned. And my mother is furious. She walks that next day, she walks into the school, she takes the kid by the hand, she says to the principal at the time, I'm really sorry, I'm taking my son out. Why? I didn't know it was a religious school. There's a knock at the door that night. Who's there? The Panovich Rav Kahaneman. And he's trying to convince this woman, as she's sitting there with her son, that she shouldn't take her son out of this yeshiva. They came from the Iron Curtain. They came from places where they didn't know anything about being Jewish. You have a chance now. Let him be part of it. She wasn't hearing it. Nothing. She was rock solid. Nothing the rabbi said. Finally, the rabbi realized that he'd failed in his mission to get this kid to be signed up. He didn't know what's going to happen to this young boy, to this young man. So he said, please, can I have a chair? And they brought him a chair. He looked like he was going to faint and collapse. And he sat down on this chair and he burst into uncontrollable sobbing. And he's crying for 2 minutes, for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes. He's crying until finally, my mother gets him a cup of water. She, some tissues. He wipes his eyes, and he leaves. It didn't change my mother's mind that Rav Kahneman cried for 10 minutes about the fact that I would be lost to the Jewish people. But it made such an impression on me that here I am at the age of 70 years old, knocking at your door, asking to be brought home. Those tears are divarim. They are harsh words. They're words that guide. The word Devarim, we find it in the Aseret HaDibrot. They're part of the 10 commandments. When you speak and you're commanding someone to do something, it's sometimes incredibly important to command your children, to command your wife or your husband or your friend. It's important. You have to command them. You need to do this. You must stop doing that. You have to command them. You need to change it. It cannot stay as it is. You can't just support. You can't just nod your head. It needs to change. But just because it needs to change doesn't mean they need to be stabbed. You know, there's no difference between a knife and a scalpel. The only difference is the way it's wielded, the hand of who holds that instrument. In the hand of a surgeon, the knife can be a life-saving thing. In the hand of a thief, that same knife can bring death and destruction. When a person needs to guide their children, it just depends on whose hands that guidance is in. Is it in the hands of someone who's in control, someone who's doing it from the right place, or is it in the hands of someone who's actually angry? And the reason why they're yelling and screaming is because they're embarrassed in their community. They don't want to be humiliated by the son that's not acting the way the rabbi's son should be acting. That is the chance that we have. And that is the lesson we learn from Moshe Rabbeinu. He waits for the right time. He waits for the right place. And he thinks deeply, how am I going to say this to my children, to my flock, to my people? Ask yourself these 3 questions, because there's no question that today, more than ever before, in the independent world that we live in the non-herd mentality guided world that we live in, when people are making choices that are not based on their background or their Judaism or their Jewish community, they're deciding for themselves because they're exposed to the Instagram world and to the Facebook world and to everything else outside there. So they have to decide for themselves. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you pick your moment with surgical precision. When can I say it? How do I say it? Where and what setting does it get said? Pay attention. Is the kid in the right state of mind to hear what you have to say? Do I have the right words picked out, hand chosen to be able to communicate this and still let him feel like he's a chacham and not a letz? Is this the right place? Is it in front of the right person? Sometimes, by the way, it doesn't take both parents to give a word of criticism. Sometimes the opposite. Letting only one parent be the one that's critical, that's saying the things that need to be said, allows the child still to have a safe space with the other parent. Think. The whole point here is not to say. The point here is to generate a desired response. So if you have a friend that's unfortunately stuck on drugs or on gambling or on alcohol or on some other self-destructive behavior, calling him a lowlife is not going to get the job done. Yelling at him that he's an addict is not going to get the job done. Telling your wife that she's negative and cynical and horrible is not going to get the job done. Telling your husband that he's uncaring and unloving and only self-absorbed, not going to get the job done. Telling a child that they're selfish or stupid or lazy is not going to get the job done. Telling a child the opposite. You're so talented. You have so much going for you. I'd love to see how you could do X. Setting the kid goals where it's clear to them that you think that they're a chacham. I see how you work for the family, honey. I see how much you love our children. You know, they need something else from you, not just for your support financially. They need you to spend some time with them like this, or they need you to help them with that. That's going to work 1,000 times better. You have a special knack with this, honey. You have a sensitivity. You'll understand what she needs, what she means. When a person does that, that's hochach lechacham v'yehaveka, and he will love you. May God bless us always to have the right words. May God bless us always to do what we need to do in the right way. And may God bless us as well to see nachat from the ones that we love the most. even through difficult times and challenging times. Shabbat Shalom. See you later. I think next week we might do this live as well. So if anyone would like to join us, I think we'll probably do it in the Hathaway Synagogue on Thursday night at 8 o'clock. We just have to make sure. Obviously, this week it's not going to be because this coming week is going to be Tisha B'Av. Stay tuned. We have an amazing program for you on Tisha B'Av with 6 different speakers starting at, I think it's 3 p.m. Take a look. You'll see. Keep your eyes open for the flyer. That's also assuming that we get the internet set up properly. It's going to be in Hathaway as well, but it will be broadcast live on Torah Anytime, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Zoom, I think. We'll give you all the details as they come. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hazak Baruch. We love you all. Shabbat Shalom.